Thank you for joining us on today's broadcast. I'm meteorologist Emily Niebuhr. It's April 5th, 2023. You can reach us on phone at 1-855-937-4977, or you can find us on the web at weather.gov/Alaska, or you can email us at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. We always love to hear from our listeners, so please drop us a line. So here are our headlines today. We do have winter weather advisories for the upper Tanana Valley and the eastern Brooks Range. We have a Gulf low and lingering precipitation across the Panhandle. It is the full pink moon of April this Wednesday evening, so that is tonight. If you're an astronomer, this is a great chance for you to enjoy the pink moon of April. We have below normal temperatures through at least mid-April, so seeing some chilly temperatures, and we'll be going over that in a moment. Let's look at your current hazards. Again, we not too active of a map, but we do have lingering snow. We have a weak system that's basically going to be caught across the eastern mainland, and so we're just going to see persistent snowfall. So we have advisories for widespread snow in the upper Tanana Valley and the eastern Brooks Range, and we're expecting in some areas up to 10 inches of snowfall and through Friday morning. So this is going to be long-lasting and through some of these travel corridors, so please travel with caution in those areas. Again, reduced visibilities and widespread snow through much of your Thursday into Friday morning in these areas especially. Let's look at your satellite imagery. We have a lot of great things happening on the weather map today. First of all, you can see our Gulf of Alaska low, bringing widespread rain and snow across much of the Panhandle today, and its front that goes right along the coast. Meanwhile, out in our central and western Aleutians, we have this very impressive low pressure system. It's going to try to move into the Bering, but we have a ridge there preventing it. Finally, we have a weak low pressure system off of Russia. So again, this is our frontal boundary that we are mostly concerned about for those advisories. Again, not a very impressive system, but it's very slow moving, and so it's just going to have that persistent snowfall all day. Our 992 millibar low in the Gulf of Alaska and its front that stretches all along the Gulf Coast. And then finally, that potent low pressure system 985 that we just saw on satellite. Very impressive. Then we have high pressure and ridge right across much of the central and eastern Bering currently. For tonight, that low pressure system is able to move further eastward into the central Bering, and that 989 low is still caught southward of the Aleutian Islands. Meanwhile, that Gulf of Alaska low is able to sneak a little bit further north, and you can see we just have that persistent band of narrow snow across the eastern mainland. For your Thursday weather, that low continues to slowly move eastward, but weaken as it does. But again, widespread snow showers across the Bering, the eastern Aleutians, and central Aleutian Islands. And we have that potent low continues to skirt to the south into the southern portions of Gulf of Alaska. And that low pressure system and its associated frontal boundary, now a trough at this point on Thursday. Again, widespread rain and snow to the Panhandle. Nothing too impressive, but persistent again across the Gulf of Alaska and then in the interior region where those advisories continue through much of your Thursday afternoon and evening. By Friday, that low pressure system weakens into just a trough. We have new high pressure system coming in off of Siberia. Meanwhile, to the east, we have finally that low pressure system that started out at the Aleutian Islands is starting to move inland towards southern portions of the Panhandle. So 973 millibar low, pretty impressive. It's the most impressive thing that we're seeing on the weather map for your Friday. Well, that lingering snow that was occurring on Thursday finally moves and makes its way into the Yukon. Let's look at your temperatures that we are expecting with these wide range of weather systems. Again, a fairly exciting active pattern. For your Thursday morning, we are going to start out in the upper 30s across much of the panhandle. Again, they're going to be under consistent rain, snowfall, and clouds. So I should say snowfall at upper levels. So we're going to be seeing persistent, fairly consistent temperatures overnight. Meanwhile, as we go into portions of south central, again, we're going to have some cloud cover. So temperatures in the valley still staying into the 20s, and in the Anchorage and Kenai areas, 26 and 24 degrees. Then as you go out west, which we'll show a little bit more next, is we are seeing these cooler temperatures. For your Thursday afternoon, again, warming into the mid-40s for much of your panhandle, but again, not a huge temperature swing with that low in place. As we're looking into the Anchorage Bowl area, into about the lower to mid-30s, and at Kodiak, 36 degrees. So again, warming into the day and that sunshine. By Friday morning, again, we're looking at temperatures in the with that low pressure system out in the panhandle in the mid-30s. And as we look towards the Anchorage area, starting to get a little cooler as that high pressure works its way in. So we're looking at Friday morning temperatures in some places in Golcana, 11 degrees. So definitely cool start to your April. By Friday afternoon, some spring sunshine helps us a little bit. We're getting into close to the mid-30s in some of our interior valleys, and lower 30s in the Anchorage and Kenai areas, but certainly below average temperatures for sure. Now let's go to our Arctic coast. Very chilly start to your Thursday morning. We're looking at minus 27 on the Arctic coast, minus 21 in some of our interior valleys. Minus 23 even at the Seward Peninsula. So we are looking at cold temperatures and cold start to your Thursday. Warming up a little bit, but still minus 13 along the Arctic coast for your Thursday afternoon. Not warming up much under the sunshine yet, quite there. And the Seward Peninsula, -3. So again, we're staying widely below zero north of the Brooks Range. So definitely some below normal spring temperatures for sure for your Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, slightly warmer, but still below, below in your teens. So we're seeing -10, -14 on the Arctic coast, minus 22 in the interior. We are for sure seeing some cold morning temperatures. Friday afternoon, still not warming up much north of the Brooks Range. We're heading in some of the interior areas 21, but mostly again, as we're looking at the Arctic coast, well below zero, even for your afternoon temperatures. Let's look at your Thursday morning as we move out west into the Bristol Bay area. We're looking at temperatures in the mid-20s along the Alaska Peninsula. And again, as we get into the eastern Aleutians, looking at temperatures at your low to mid-30s for your Thursday morning. Going to see a slight warm up, but again, being in the Bering, it's going to keep temperatures fairly moderated. So temperatures near 40 in the eastern and central Aleutians, and a lot in the Alaska Peninsula, we still have some cold air in there. So in the mid-30s. Friday morning, again, chilly along Bristol Bay. We're looking at -5, -1. It's going to be chilly across much of the state, and even along that Alaska Peninsula, only in your mid-20s. Meanwhile, out in the Bering, we're seeing closer to those low pressure systems temperatures in the lower 30s. By Friday afternoon, we do see a little bit of warming, but still only in their single digits near Bethel area. So we definitely are seeing some cold temperatures. Let's look at your CPC 6 to 10 day outlook. We're seeing, again, like we're saying, for April 11th through 15th, swath of very below average temperatures all the way from Anchorage, Kenai Peninsula into much of central. Near Bethel, we're still seeing pretty significant chance of below average temperatures up there, and even all the way up to the Arctic coast. We're not really seeing anything near average for your 6 to 10 day outlook. Your 8 to 14 day outlook, still widespread below average temperatures even through April 19th. So even as we're getting towards mid to late April, we're still looking at below average temperatures. We do look like we have a slightly greater than average chance of above average precipitation, so widespread rain and snow showers.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us for the aviation portion of this broadcast. We have two main systems impacting the state for your Thursday morning weather. We do have IFR conditions due to a weakening low and frontal system in the Bering, and we also have a low pressure system in the North Pacific that is a bit stronger. As we go further east, you see we have widespread IFR conditions in the eastern mainland due to a weakening low pressure system. By Thursday afternoon, that low continues to weaken and move into the Yukon, but we still have widespread IFR conditions across the far eastern portions of the mainland. As we're going in the Bering, and we have IFR conditions due to that weakening low pressure system as well. By your Friday morning, we have mostly MVFR conditions in the Bering as that low continues to weaken, but we do have IFR conditions that are going to be lingering along the North Arctic coast and in some of our valleys up north. By Friday afternoon, we have a new system moving into the Shemya area and starting to bring IFR conditions there. Meanwhile, we see some of the IFR conditions erode in the far North Arctic coast and mainly MVFR conditions experienced in the state, and a mixture of MVFR and IFR conditions in the Panhandle Friday. Let's take a look at your pass conditions. For Anaktuvuk Pass, we are looking at IFR conditions for your Thursday. Same story for Aitken. It's going to be impacted by that mainland low, IFR conditions. Further south, we're going to start out at MVFR conditions for Lake Clark and Merrill, but improve to VFR conditions towards your afternoon hours. For Raining Pass, you're going to linger in MVFR conditions for your Thursday. Windy Pass is going to have IFR conditions and going to improve to MVFR conditions by your afternoon hours. Isabel Pass is going to remain in IFR conditions for your Thursday. Meanwhile, Mentasta Pass as well is going to be experiencing IFR conditions on your Thursday as well. Tahitna is going to linger in MVFR conditions for your Thursday. Portage, again, even though that low will be drifting away, still some lingering clouds, so we're looking at MVFR conditions all day at Portage. Chilkoot and White are going to be under the influence of that low pressure system that is going to be in the Panhandle. So again, IFR conditions for both passes for all of your Thursday. But for your Thursday morning freezing levels, as you can see, cold air is entrenched across much of the mainland. You have to go into the Bering to see temperatures above freezing at the surface. We also have some warmer air associated with a more potent low in the North Pacific. But again, freezing levels at 2,000 or 4,000 feet, you have to go pretty far south. Same story for that low pressure system near the Panhandle. Again, a little bit of warmer air, 2,000, 4,000 freezing levels, but mostly cold air again across much of your state. In terms of icing, our greatest concern, again, is that weakening low near Juneau, and we're going to have considerable moderate icing conditions near the Panhandle. Meanwhile, as we go further west, we're just going to have widespread isolated moderate due to that weakening low pressure system in the Bering on Thursday. Let's take a look at your upper level winds. The jet stream, again, is most potent associated with that strong upper level low just south of the Aleutian Islands. We have 105 and 80 knots occurring in the western Bering as well. While as we go out to the east, we have 95 knots across the Yukon, and we also have some northwesterly flow across the mainland aloft at about 65 knots. For your Thursday at 9,000 feet, going lower in the atmosphere, again, we're seeing winds about 55 knots in the western Bering. We're seeing winds 55 to 60 knots near the Panhandle. And again, at 3,000-foot winds, we are seeing the strong low-level jet, 60 knots, right near the Panhandle. And as I'll show you in a moment, that's where we have the greatest concern for turbulence at lower levels for your Thursday. So again, 60 knots associated with this weakening low. Also in the Bering at 3,000 feet, we also have 55 knots in the western Bering. So again, widespread winds at 3,000 feet at your lower elevations. So again, across the Panhandle, we're looking at considerable moderate turbulence across much of the area associated with that low pressure system and jet we were just taking a look at. Also with this offshore flow, we're also have a risk coming off of the Alaska range. We could get some bumpy turbulence, considerable moderates, and also as we go on into the western Aleutian Islands.
Our ancestors, as Inupiaq people, they had to adapt and overcome every single day. If the ice isn't coming in the way it usually does, we got to figure out a way to go and still maintain our subsistence lifestyle. Rural Alaska has the highest rate of suicide per capita for the entire United States. I lost 13 of my basketball teammates and classmates to alcohol-related deaths and suicides. I went to that dark place in my life. That's when a kid said, hey, you should try out for American Ninja Warrior.
More than 40,000 applicants.
So I built a ninja course. Uniloclete, you know, it's only accessible by plane or boat. You can't just go to a Home Depot or get materials. Went walking down on the beach and just picked up logs and turned them into Ninja Warrior obstacles, and that was my training ground.
Uniloclete is a community that sits where the Uniloclete River comes down and feeds into the Bering Sea. Much like other communities, Uniloclete relies on shorefast ice to protect it from storms throughout the winter.
And that ice kind of comes right up against the beach, and it creates this barrier between us and weather.
When that shorefast ice is gone, when that protective barrier is gone, it presents an immense challenge as that coastline is eroded.
Back in September, we had a big storm.
Basically flooded my entire course and tore apart like half of my obstacles.
And I was hopeless, you know, there was nothing I could do against the weather. But more importantly, we were wondering if we were gonna have to evacuate town. We were worried if we were safe or not.
The ice season in the Bering Sea region has shifted from November to June to January to late April.
By February, we'd have maybe 4 or 5 feet, 6 feet of ice by springtime. I used to help our aunties and grandmothers when they went ice fishing. If you're small, younger, 12 years old, you have to get inside that hole.
Sometimes it's so deep I can't even reach the bottom of my dook. And you keep chipping, but you can't pull the slush out.
When you get near the bottom, a water will rush up. If you're not careful, you'll get all wet. Now we're lucky if we get 6 inches, 12 inches a year.
You know, in my lifetime, I've seen the amount of ice almost diminish.
As you lose protective shorefast ice along the coast, communities are exposed to a rough ocean for much longer periods throughout the year.
You get a 20-mile-an-hour wind, those waves get pretty big, and they start eating away at the land that we live on.
Well, Uniloclete's a village of 750 people. There's a river on one side and then the ocean on the other side.
When you have storm surge, it's not only a rising sea, but a rising river as well.
We're lucky that we do have a dike made up of rock. However, that rock settles with wave action. The wave action becomes larger and just more water with full force hitting the beach. When this high water comes, it a lot of times can go over even the airport runway. And it brings in wood, it brings in rock. Well, we kind of become like an island. We're surrounded by water.
There are communities all the way from the northern side of the Seward Peninsula all the way down to the Aleutian Islands that are facing extreme rates of coastal erosion.
Beaches are kind of washing away. We're seeing a lot of landslides. We're seeing a lot of sinkholes.
Back when I grew up as a little boy, and we'd travel the ocean ice to Shaktoolik about 44 miles, and we no longer can do that. We're having to travel on an inland trail, and a lot of times it's not enough snow or consistent rain melting the snow.
Our springs are thawing out earlier. The foundation of the frozen river is not as solid as it has been in the past. Last fall, my wife's uncle raced down to get some tomcats, got a few tomcats, coming back, fell through the ice and drowned. I need to haul wood earlier in the winter instead of late in the spring like we've been doing.
Sooner or later, our lowlands may get flooded out.
You know, moving out of here, it just has never been an option for me.
The only options are relocating, and some people are doing that along the hillside.
The community of Unalakleet decided to set up an allotment for young people that, you know, wanted to have their own place to live. They wanted their own piece of land and their own home.
Get up in the higher areas for safety.
I want to, you know, eventually have my own kids, and, you know, I just wanted to have my own place and just, you know, my kids to grow up and say, my dad built this house with his bare hands. Change is tough for a lot of elders. Like, this is their home. This is where they grew up.
It took me 25 years to pay off a 3-bedroom home, and I can't afford to even consider moving my home.
Born in Alaska, raised in Unalakleet. It's heaven on earth if you live here for long enough. Once I started doing American Ninja Warrior, the entire community just fully supported me.
Here I am auditioning and sending you guys a video, so pick me.
The producers of the show loved it.
Quickly through these first 2 hours. This is a wild ride. Nick Hansen, go on with your backside.
It turned into this crazy phenomenon. So now it's just a matter of starting from scratch. It's an opportunity to start something fresh and start something new, and it's going to be amazing.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us on the marine segment of this broadcast. First, we're going to take a look at what our sea ice edge is doing. You can see across much of the Chukchi Sea, we have widespread sea ice conditions, and in the northern Bering as well. As we go further south, again, as we've been talking about, 'tis the season. We are seeing the sea ice edge continue to erode to the north, especially with several low pressure systems that have been coming into the Bering and a lot of southerly flow that's helping to break up the ice, push it northwards. And we can also see that happening in Bristol Bay as well, where some areas are mostly sea ice free. So again, these are your conditions for your sea ice. You can see it's slowly working its way up to Savunga. Let's talk about your marine weather. As you can tell, we have a strong coastal jet still lingering on portions of the Panhandle region, but it is weaker than it has been for the past few days. So that's a good trend. We're at, for your Thursday, looking at mostly 20 to 15 knots, getting up to near gale force towards the south at 30 knots with 11-foot waves. Even in sheltered areas, though, we're still seeing up to 8-foot waves near Ketchikan and 25 knots. So be careful in some of these interior areas as well, as we are approaching small craft advisory conditions in those areas. Friday looks even better for marine travel. We're looking at waves about 6 feet, even in the Gulf of Alaska, and winds about 10 to 15 knots. But we do, again, still have a little bit of a gap flow in Ketchikan area, so up to 4 feet wave conditions and 20-knot wind conditions. So, again, be careful of your travel in your interior areas in the southeast for Friday. For your Thursday forecast for the North Gulf Coast, you can see we're still having that outflow conditions, so about 10-foot waves in southern portions of Cook Inlet, 35 knots. Again, we're looking at gale force conditions through the gaps. And along the North Gulf Coast, we're looking at 20 knots, 7-foot waves. Prince William Sound, even in the sheltered areas, we're seeing 20-knot winds from the northwest and waves of up to 4 feet. As we go into your Friday, conditions definitely improve, but we're still seeing about small craft advisory conditions, 25 knots, 7-foot waves in southern portions of Cook Inlet, 15-knot winds and 3-foot waves outside of Homer, and up to 2 feet as you go towards more of the sea ice conditions in the northern parts of the inlet. And generally, Prince William Sound, about 2-foot waves, and along the North Gulf Coast, 10 to 15 knots, with waves at about 6 feet. So good conditions on your Friday as well. For your Thursdays, we move towards the Alaska Peninsula. Again, we're looking at sometimes variable winds, but generally from the north, 15 knots, 20 knots, a little stronger as you go towards Kodiak Island. But again, 2-foot wave conditions in Bristol Bay and even in the North Pacific. Friday, we began to see the impact of our frontal system start to move into the area. We're starting to see about 20-knot winds from the north-northwest up to 25 knots, and waves increasing to about 7 feet in the Bristol Bay area. So be advised for your Friday, wind and wave conditions will be a bit greater in the Bristol Bay area. As we move towards the Aleutian chain, again, we see this frontal system moving in 35 knots, gale force winds in the western portions of the Bering. 11-foot waves, 13-foot waves as you go to the Bering side of things. Even as we go in towards the central Aleutians away from that main system, still looking at 8-foot waves, 9-foot waves, and winds bordering on gale force, so 30 knots on your Thursday. By Friday, that system moves further to the east, and you can see we have winds of 35 to 40 knots and waves up to 17 feet in portions of the Bering near the Aleutian Islands in the east and the central Aleutian Islands. So definitely in the gale force category there as well, and 15-foot waves on southern portions of south of the islands. As we get up to your ice edge on Thursday, you can see we have 25 knot winds and 6-foot waves. As we move into Friday, as that low pressure system and frontal system moves in, we see a little bit increase in the waves of up to 6 feet along the ice edge and generally 15 knots within the ice. As we go north, we have light winds, 10 knots on your Thursday. Friday as well, although we do see an increase of winds in your Prudhoe Bay, Kaktovik areas. Again, here are low pressure systems for your Thursday. And you can see we have something in the Gulf.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.